afternoon. I'm here to speak to you about using a supportive community group process to cope with the trauma of social fragmentation and promote re-socialization in the Bahamas. Okay, so my country is located just south of Miami, Florida, and just outside the Caribbean Sea. You can see Cuba to our south, along with Haiti. There we are, right there. And my employer, Dr. David Allen, I work for a psychotherapist. We offer free group therapy in marginalized neighborhoods in the Bahamas. And like many countries in South and Central America, the inner cities of the USA, the Bahamas has undergone a serious social fragmentation due to the countrywide cocaine epidemic of the 1980s and its continuing sequelae, as well as the international financial downturn of 2008. So the social fragmentation, it involves family and community disintegration. It's manifested by burgeoning rates of murder, violent crime, domestic violence, child abuse, and the formation of violent youth gangs due to the high rate of youth unemployment. I collected some data from our Central Detective Unit, a quality control section, and you can see here the homicides in the Bahamas from 1963 to 2015. And in 1963, we started out, we had 5 for the year. Here in the 80s, during the cocaine epidemic, you can see the spike. And just last year, we recorded 149 homicides. So the epidemic moved to a chronic relapsing state in which violence became somewhat endemic. I'm going to show you a video of our... Can you ask them to? Yeah. I'll just move on until they...
Did you track from here?
Yeah, that's right.
Locate the internet. Yeah, just because of the internet. You don't have it in your drive?
No, he said he would turn on the internet program.
Okay.
I can move on until you...
Okay, just go ahead and move on.
Okay, I'll move on and come back to the video. So our program was created in 2008. It's a community-based intervention. Like I said before, it was designed by Dr. David Allen. What it is a supportive group process that involves storytelling, reflection, self-examination, and transformation. We posit the theory that when you... that when you sit and share your story, there's a healing bond that's produced, and that's what we call family, and hence the name of the program. So we offer it in 24 marginalized Bahamian communities, and we have an average of 350 participants that attend our program weekly. It's based on Sir John Templeton's mantra that if you change your mind, you'll change your life and eventually change your world.
Bahamas is so beautiful. But in the midst of this beauty, there's tremendous tragedy of people shooting, stabbing each other. With this powerful social fragmentation, the work we're doing is not optional. It's a must. And this is where Mark Beckford and his dear wife Maggie come in. They are graduates of Taylor University, and Mark, who is an ex-gang leader, is really a specialist in working with teenagers.
Hey, stop along on the right. Let's go. Let's go, boy.
And it's just been amazing. Since he's come in the past 2 months, we've made contact with at least over 100 young people and growing. I was extremely impressed of how he's able to mobilize so many young people using basketball and discipline and sports.
That's the reason for counting. Everybody's supposed to be counting. There's no confusion there. That's zero. Ready, set, go.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Hey, everybody count.
1, 2, 3.
We do have a gang problem in the Bahamas, like most countries do. But what we've found by using sport and bringing kids together, they learn to play together. If you can play sport together, you learn to talk because there are rules and there's discipline. And as a result of that, it's almost like you're starting a new kind of gang, but a good gang.
No foul languages under no circumstances. No fighting, because if anyone try to throw a blow and count like they want to fight, I myself will carry inside them. I let them run up front. I play with them.
It's mostly on basketball, but it's more on how to have fun without being violent. We're showing them if a bunch of community come together, it don't have to be a war or no gangs or no trouble. Just show them we can be at peace.
They win the first game. First game, us. All right.
You know, my first time I got suspended from school, he was working with me. He's like a father figure in my life because I ain't have a father at the moment. Like, showed me the right path. Sometimes we go to church together. He check up on me, make sure I stay straight in school. It feels like I have a father in my life. As I know, I ain't gonna let him down. Just he put all his effort into my work.
You see this young man, he's one of our adolescents that's a part of one of our teenage programs, and he was just talking about the impact that the program and the mentor had on him and how he wouldn't let him down because he felt like a father figure. So I'll go on to our thesis is based on shame. So shame is a powerful, multifaceted emotion which results from the shattering or loss of cherished expectations, wishes, or dreams, creating in us a sense of abandonment, rejection, and humiliation. Though it's hidden in and attached to our deepest secrets, the faces of shame are seen in society as anger, violence, revenge, and abuse. So as a result, the person becomes at war with themselves, hence the mnemonic for shame as self-hatred aimed at me. Social fragmentation is caused by the negativity of shame, giving persons a diminished view of themselves, others, and the world. Our thesis was by analyzing the themes of the family groups in the country, we would see the evidences of the faces of shame shown in society and have the opportunity to confront and work through them. So it's our belief that an individual willing to work on their shame can be re-socialized. And we use the definition here for re-socialization, the liberation of the person from the negativity of shame to experience positive emotions such as love, forgiveness, and gratitude, resulting in an increase in self-esteem and the development of community. The method used is after every group session, the therapist or the facilitator, they write a praxis report outlining the interaction, overt and covert themes, and reflection. So what I did was I analyzed 776 of these reports from October 2013 to November 2014. However, my total number of themes can surpass the 776 because a lot of times each session covers more than one theme. Some of the testimonial evidence, besides the young man in the video, our participants said they had an increase in the overall functioning and coping abilities, a decrease in depression, increase in tolerance, a decrease in the tendency to seek revenge, an increase in anger management and conflict resolution, a decrease in involvement in abusive relationships, increase in contentment, and a positive outlook on life. Here are the qualitative results that came out of my study. So we see here the 8 most prevalent themes that came up in our sessions. with the most popular one being anger, followed by violence, grief, relationships, abuse, suicide and depression, infidelity and domestic violence, and addiction. So other themes represented that didn't come up in the graphs were disappointment, frustration, revenge, etc. The prevalence of social fragmentation in the community is represented by the high incidence of the first 5 themes. Anger leads to violence, which always involves loss and grief. The cycle of anger and violence affects relationships and also creates various forms of abuse in the home and community. So although it's undoubtedly an important issue for the family's population of interest, because we deal with marginalized people, addiction was discussed the least frequently. Also, we thought people would talk about their circumstances, such as financial hardships, but they didn't. They were more concerned about what happened to them, which means that Bahamians, their chief complaint is that they don't feel safe. It's an angry and a violent society, if you remember the homicide graph that I showed you prior. Some of the quantitative results coming out of our study: every 6 months in April and October, we test our participants with 9 internationally recognized psychological scales, which includes the Beck Depression Score, Bus-Durkee Hostility Guilt Inventory, the Hope Scale, Gratitude Questionnaire, Hamilton Anxiety Scale, Internalized Shame Scale, Transgression-Related Interpersonal Motivations Inventory, and Satisfaction with Life, along with Spiritual Well-Being. So there were increases in many positive measures in the testing period. Between the testing periods, if you come over here and you see the purple was our first testing period, the blue is our second, and the pink was our third. So you can see increases with satisfaction with life, hope, gratitude, spiritual well-being, self-esteem, and benevolence. And then you see decreases on the graph on the left in shame, guilt, depression, anxiety, suspicion, negativism, verbal aggression, and assault. If we come here and we look at forgiveness, you can see slight decreases in resentment, irritability, revenge, and avoidance, and those are inversely related to forgiveness. So if you see a decrease in those, that means that there's an increase in forgiveness. Just to look at our one of our most prevalent themes that came up, anger. So according to Helen Lewis, anger and shame are intimately related. There's a widespread phenomenon of alexithymia in the Bahamas, and what alexithymia is the lack of expression of negative feelings. So instead of expressing the negative feelings, people are acting in it in violent behavior. An example of this was one of our students said that a schoolmate came into the classroom and verbally abused her. Instead of expressing that she was angry at the abuse, she retaliated by throwing a chair at the student. Also, during an adolescent session, members identified common triggers of anger, such as disrespect, annoyance, and provocation. And the facilitator asked them how they express this, and they said that they express it by using foul language and engaging in fights. Thankfully, our program has been proven to decrease anger, as seen in our test results. Right down here, decrease in anger toward others, decrease in vengeance, and decreased thoughts of revenge. Okay, our second most prevalent theme was violence. So again, because of the burgeoning rates of crime in our society, Bahamians have been forced to live in fear. In his book, Violence, Reflection on a National Epidemic, James Gilligan concluded that most criminal violence can be understood as a desperate attempt to ward off shame. According to Dr. Allen, when a shamed person is threatened or continues to be hurt, it breaks down their shame defense, and they enter the violent destructive tunnel, which he categorizes as experiencing hurt, anger, and shame all at once. In this tunnel, there's cognitive disintegration involving a decreased IQ, ethical fragmentation, and a compulsive repetitive desire to be destructive. If the shame rage is directed at the self, it leads to masochistic or suicidal behavior, and if it's directed at others, it leads to sadistic or homicidal behavior. If we could look at a case study, there was a distraught mother that came into one of our sessions crying. She had 2 sons, and she shared how her one of the sons was brutally murdered. Apparently, there was an altercation because he got in an argument with people who he believes stole a bicycle from his younger brother, and the perpetrators retaliated by killing him. So now the younger brother is experiencing the hurt because his older brother was killed. He was angry at the people who killed him, and then he was ashamed because he felt like it was his fault because it was his bicycle that they were fighting over. Sadly, the younger brother has now expressed feelings of guilt and suicidal behaviors. Okay. If we look at our third theme, it was grief. So the homicides in the Bahamas occur so frequently that grief is aborted. We believe that every Bahamian has a sociophile of 100 people. That's about 100 people that they know. And what happens is when one person is murdered, those 100 people are affected. But as quickly as the second person is murdered, one of the 100 people from the first person of it might, because it's a small island community, they probably know the second person that was murdered as well. As such, many participants in our program, they're dealing with grief. Results from our most recent testing period in October 2014, 80% of our participants admitted that they know at least one person who has been killed. A facilitator at an adolescent group entered the session to find participants in a somber mode. It was announced that one of the group members had been tragically murdered 2 days prior to the session. A number of members shared experiences of dealing with grief and loss. So describing grief, the teenager said that it's as if I lost me. I became someone else, enraged, living recklessly. Life was never the same. Another one of our themes was relationships. So dysfunctional relationships are discussed frequently in our group sessions. Males share they're manipulated by females' expectations, and then females share difficulty in expressing feelings to distant males. According to Dr. Allen, people we love deeply make us most angry because where we expected love, we get hurt in return. So when the love is expressed, the hurt love presents itself as anger, resentment, bitterness, and hardness of heart. In our last testing period, almost a third of our participants admitted to being less angry with people in their lives after participating in our group sessions. So you see here, before joining the family, I felt very angry with some of the people in my life. It was at 3.3, and then after joining the family, it decreased to 2.6. It takes time in these group sessions. It doesn't happen overnight. We have found that if a person is involved in a negative relationship, but they continue to work on themselves in the group, they develop the courage to become more assertive and less codependent. Okay. Another one of our themes was abuse. This is another one of our formulas, shame plus abuse equals violent behavior. So the shame and the negativity associated with abuse is a powerful precursor to violent behavior. We cite Helen Lewis again. She has described the direct correlation between abuse in childhood and violent acts committed in later teenage years. Case study, we had a young worker who shared that he was molested and abused as a child. So you see the abuse and the shame associated with it. He said he didn't meet his mother until he was 18 years old, and he was abandoned by his father. This had a negative effect on his life, and many times he despaired of living. 2 years ago, he attempted to kill himself. You see the masochistic violent behavior. He attempted to kill himself by taking an overdose of pills. He said he was always there to help other people, but when he needed help, no one was there for him. If you take a look at some of our results, significantly fewer participants were in abusive relationships once they joined our group. You see here, before joining the family, were you in an abusive relationship? And 25% of the people answered yes, 74.8% said no. And then another one of our questions asks, are you currently in an abusive relationship? And it went down to 10.7% who can answer yes, and 89.3% who said no. So just to conclude, the Family People Helping People project was developed as a safe space to help traumatized persons work through their shame and pain. Participants are encouraged to share their personal stories and accept their part of the responsibility for their issues. The thematic analysis indicates the depth of the negativity of shame, but also provides hope for re-socialization. So our hope is that this community group process intervention could become more widespread in dealing with the painful traumas of marginalized society. My supporting authors, Dr. David Allen and Dr. Marie Allen Carroll, and I would also like to acknowledge the funding of the Templeton World Charity Foundation, without whom our project wouldn't be possible. Those are the references used in my presentation, and I'd like to know if you have any questions.